Well, there's many things I'm grateful for. My grandchildren, they're the ones who keep me happy and going.
My family, my classmates, and my school.
Good food, good steak.
Definitely God and my family.
I'm grateful for my family and my church.
Just having dinner with my wife. When you look back in your life, the conversations you have at the dinner table are something that are really going to mean a lot to you.
I definitely haven't told my brother that I'm grateful for him because sometimes he can be a real big pain, but I do love him so much. He's always there, and I really appreciate that.
Waking up next to my beautiful bride.
Finding a church community that I can really connect with.
My children.
My family always has my back no matter what.
I'm grateful that God forgives us for all the things that we've done wrong, and He takes our messes and He's able to make it better than it was before. I'm grateful the way He brought my family together. And I'm gonna get emotional so I can.
I'm even happy to be alive since I just came out of the hospital with a blood clot in my lung, and here I am.
I get to go outside every day and breathe this fresh air that calms me and gives me peace when I'm feeling anxious.
I am grateful for everything I have, and I will always be grateful.
Gratitude changes everything.
All right, well today we are in the third part of a series called Grateful. If you're new here, what we like to do is we take our teaching messages and we kind of group them together in what we call a series under some common theme. And we've been talking about gratitude over the past couple weeks. Now before we jump into it, I'll catch you up a little bit, but here's what I want you to think about, all right? Is there anyone here who would consider themselves a Christmas person? Yeah, like just love Christmas all the time. Okay, so I love Christmas. I get it. Like, it's fantastic. I didn't grow up like a Christmas person, though. My wife, definitely a Christmas person. So she, will watch Elf year round. It'll be on in the middle of July. We're watching Elf. And this has been passed down now to my son, who's 7 years old. He comes home from school. It could be any time of the year, and he immediately changes into Christmas pajamas. Any time of the year, he's got these button-up, flannel pajamas. It's just Christmas all the time in my house. And so I wouldn't consider myself a Christmas person, but now I am, just because I don't really have a choice at this point, which is great. If you're one of those people who's like, no Christmas until after Thanksgiving, I get that because I've been there, but I'm not there anymore. Now, Thanksgiving is part of the Christmas season, right? Well, for us, that means like we prepare for Christmas in pretty big ways. If you've been downstairs, you've seen there's lights, there's the garland, people are working on stuff. It looks like Santa's workshop exploded downstairs. And outside, you may have noticed there are lights on the building because we're preparing for Christmas. A few years ago, Tom and I actually put the lights up on the roof. And so we got up there and straddled the peak of the building, which was exciting because we had to get ready for Christmas. And we did that once. Now we get a professional to do it because Tom threatened to call OSHA. But yeah, so we're getting ready for Christmas. Well, over the past few weeks, we've been trying to prepare for Thanksgiving. Right? Not in a food way, but internally. This whole idea of gratitude. There's one time a year where we celebrate the things that we're grateful for. And so over the past few weeks, we've been thinking okay, so what's involved in being grateful? What actually happens internally when we talk about something like gratitude? We said gratitude, to put it in its simplest form, and maybe this isn't the perfect definition, but we said gratitude is really seeing the good. It's choosing to recognize the good that's around you. And on week one, we talked about the benefits of gratitude, which are just mind-blowing. In case you haven't Googled this yourself, the benefits of gratitude are, they're surprising, and it seems to affect every area of life. People who are grateful tend to have stronger relationships. They report feeling much better, like just an overall sense of well-being and satisfaction in life. They tend to make better decisions. They tend to be more patient. Gratitude can affect your internal well-being, but also your physical well-being. Like, it can have an effect on things like your blood pressure, your stress levels, it's crazy how beneficial gratitude is. And so if you're like me, I look at that list of all the benefits of gratitude and I'm like, okay, I want that, right? Like if there's a button I gotta push to get those things, I'm pushing that button. If there's a lever I gotta pull, I'm pulling that lever because I want all of those benefits of gratitude. And if that's true, if really gratitude is that good and that beneficial, well then why isn't everyone doing it all the time? And what we suggested is maybe it's not because we don't want to. Maybe it's because maybe we spend so much time talking about the fact that we should be grateful and not enough talking about how to be grateful. So over the past few weeks, we've been looking at some specific steps we can take in the direction of gratitude. The idea behind this series was really 3 practical steps or practical tools that can help get us toward this idea of gratitude. On week 1, the first tool, the first step was something we called awareness. And this idea of awareness is specifically an awareness of the beliefs we have beneath the surface, right? What we said is that your beliefs beneath the surface, the things that you believe about certain things, they have the ability to amplify or undermine your ability to feel grateful, right? Like, think about this. The example I use is a little boy that you give a plate of broccoli or a bowl of broccoli to. I was the little boy, by the way. I didn't tell you that in the example, but I was, and like broccoli. You can give a little boy a bowl of broccoli and tell him to be grateful for that. And he can learn that he's supposed to. And he can also learn to say he's grateful without ever actually experiencing feelings of gratitude. He's just learned how to say it. And I'd argue that that's true for a lot of us when it comes to being grateful. We've learned, okay, I should be grateful for this, so yes, I'll say thank you, or I'll say I'm grateful for it because it's an important thing, but maybe we don't actually feel that sense of gratitude. And maybe the issue is deeper than we realize. You know, if you talk to that boy and you address the beliefs beneath the surface, you can get to the feeling of gratitude. Like, if you told that boy that eating that bowl of broccoli was gonna make him 6'5" and he's got dreams of playing in the NBA, you can bet that he's gonna be grateful for that. Because what you're doing is speaking to the beliefs beneath the surface. And a lot of times when we're trying to express or feel gratitude toward certain things or certain people, and we're not getting there, it's because of something we believe about that person or situation. And we backed up a little bit and talked about this idea of worldview and God and how God fits into all of this. And because worldview and your understanding of God is so big and affects so many other areas of life, we said specifically your beliefs about God will amplify or undermine your ability to feel grateful. Like if you believe that God is just this angry, power-hungry dictator who just is waiting for you to mess up so he could drop the hammer, and that's why things never go your way, that will undermine your ability to feel grateful for things in life. But if you genuinely believe that he's for you, in your corner, that will give you the ability to feel grateful. It'll cause you to lean in the direction of gratitude. So week 1, we talked about this awareness. We have to address what we really believe about certain things, especially God and the world. But then the following week, last week actually, we talked about something called intention. So it's awareness, intention, intentionally seeing the good. Sometimes we don't feel grateful because there's something that we believe that's undermining that gratitude. And other times it's simply because we're not being intentional about recognizing the good in our lives. We're not on the lookout for it. I told you about something we've talked about in the past called the Tetris effect, which comes from this experiment that they did with a bunch of people, and they had them play Tetris for hours. You know, the game with the dropping shapes and the awesome music in the background, that anxiety-producing music, right? And they drop, and you got to put them. And after doing that for hours, people reported leaving and looking at like how things fit into different places in life, like books on a bookshelf or chairs in a row. And the idea is that the Tetris effect, because it's how our minds work, what we see intentionally, we eventually see automatically. It's why the people in your life that tend to be grateful tend to be grateful. And the people that tend to see the bad in situations tend to see the bad in situations. It's become a habit. It becomes what they pick up on quickly. And so we have to be intentional about looking for the good, and eventually we'll begin to see it more automatically. It'll still take effort, but we'll see it more automatically. There's this other idea which is called selective attention, what one author refers to as the spam folder, which is the other side of this. What we fail to see intentionally, we tend to miss completely. If we're not looking for the good in our lives intentionally, it may just happen and pass us by. I told you a story about my son and having an experience where I had the chance to watch him grow up and develop and savor this moment. But my tendency is to just move on to the next thing because I'm not looking for the good around me. So we talked about awareness and intention. Today, in the time we have left, we're talking about the third step in the direction of gratitude. And this one, for me, and I think if you're someone who considers yourself a follower of Jesus or a person of faith, this may be the most important one because of how it affects the other people in our lives, the people around us, our relationships. And even if you're not a person of faith, this is a step toward gratitude that can genuinely transform your relationships. Can genuinely transform how you interact with people. And Jesus addressed this specifically. It was recorded by a guy named Luke, who's a doctor. We've talked about him before in our Awkward Dinner series. We talked a lot about Luke. Well, Luke is writing, he's recording the story about Jesus, and there's this one story he includes with Jesus and these people who have a skin condition called leprosy. Here's what the story says. It says, now on his way to Jerusalem, this is Jesus they're talking about. He's going to Jerusalem with his 12 best friends, these guys we call the disciples, and probably a bunch more people. At this point, Jesus was famous, and so he's probably being followed by a crowd and his 12 disciples. And they're on their way to Jerusalem, and he's traveling along the border between Samaria and Galilee. Now, if you're part of the ancient world and you're part of Jesus' crew, you would have been Jewish. Jesus and his followers, they were Jewish. And so Galilee for them was like the hometown. Cool place, comfort zone. That's where Jesus would like to hang out and feel totally comfortable with all his little followers, right? But Samaria was one of those areas you didn't go to, because the people there were really seen as opponents to what they believed. And the crowds around Jesus were constantly surprised by how well he spoke of Samaritans. It was like Jesus was never afraid to lean in the direction of people no one else liked. And so here he's right on the border of Galilee and Samaria. I don't know if there was an actual line there that he's straddling, but apparently he's uncomfortably close for some people. And he meets a group of people while this is happening. So he's traveling along the border, and as he was going into a village, it says 10 men who had leprosy met him. Now, leprosy, if you don't know, in the ancient world was a skin condition that ate away at literally your layers of skin, but it also ate away at your nervous system. And so people who had leprosy often couldn't feel. Sometimes you'll see pictures of that try to depict what it looked like in the ancient world if you had leprosy, and sometimes people are missing fingers and toes, and it's not because they fell off, it's because they probably got hurt, and the owner of the fingers didn't feel it because they couldn't feel things like pain. And it gradually ate away at your nervous system. So it was a really difficult thing to live with. On top of that, according to their law, if you had leprosy, you couldn't be around anyone else. So anytime you entered any kind of environment with other people, you had to announce your presence. They'd walk into a room where there were other people, and they would immediately warn everyone that they were unclean and people needed to get out of the way. Imagine having to walk into a room with people you don't know and announce that they need to get away from you. And people would run because they were afraid of having leprosy. If you had leprosy, you were cut off from your family, from your friends, from your job. You just didn't get to have those things anymore because you had to live away from everyone else with other lepers. And so it was horrible. It was heartbreaking to find out you had leprosy. And so people would flee from lepers because they didn't want to get it. And so Jesus meets these 10 guys who have leprosy, and they're hanging out with each other because lepers can only hang out with lepers. And here's what happens. It says, they stood at a distance, which you would expect because they're not allowed to get close. And they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. They use this word master. This is a term of respect. And when they say have pity, they're asking him to feel for them. Like this word for pity in our culture, a lot of times we think pity and we think like pathetic, like pity. But really they're saying like feel for us. Stop what you're doing and think about what it's like to live like us, to go through what we're going through every single day, to be in our situation. And he replies, he doesn't address their leprosy. It says he saw them and he said, go, show yourselves to the priests. Now he's not just passing them off to someone else. He's not saying, I don't want to see your issue, go show someone else. In that world, at that time, if you were ceremonially unclean, which these people were considered unclean, you could be unclean because you had a condition like that. You could be unclean because you touched something you weren't supposed to touch. You could be unclean because you ate something you weren't supposed to eat. But if you wanted to be able to go back into the community, to get the green light, like you're good now, you would go to the priest. So Jesus is saying, they're like, have mercy on us, feel for us, have pity on us. He's like, go get the green light from the priest. And they've still got their issue. And so for them to go was a pretty huge step of faith. Like they're trusting him. Now they don't have much to lose. Like what else are they gonna do? So they're like, okay. And with their leprosy, they go. And it says, as they went, they were cleansed. Now I don't know what this looked like, but there came a point where they realized it's gone. I don't know what it felt like. They were probably pretty happy. There's probably some celebrating, but this miraculous thing happened, which is why it was recorded and preserved for thousands of years, because it's not an everyday thing that happens. But as they're walking, they're cleansed. And immediately, in an instant, like everything they've been missing out on, they now have access to again. They can now be with their families again. They can now have their jobs back. They can now like live normal lives and not have to live in solitude and isolation. So this is a big, big deal. And their lives are changed. You can imagine them being thrilled. And it says one of them, when he saw he was healed, he came back and he came back praising God in a loud voice. He sees Jesus and it says he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. Not at a distance, right? But now he's right up in his face. He drops down to the floor and he's thrilled. It's this picture of over the top, extravagant expressions of joy. This guy is thrilled and he's running back to express this gratitude. And Luke like adds this thing here and says, and he was a Samaritan. And so here's this point again that Jesus is trying to make like all throughout his life to these people, how he leans in the direction of people a lot of people push away. And so Jesus asks a question and he says, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? In the original language it says, the other 9, where? Where are they? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. Now it's easy to kind of read into this, right? To put like the thoughts we have about God into Jesus' response here. But Jesus is not acting ungrateful, like for the other people not coming back and expressing their gratitude. You know, it could seem like Jesus is like, well, what about everyone else? Are they gonna thank me too? But really what he's doing here, especially in light of the fact that this guy is a Samaritan, he's celebrating and elevating what this guy did, even though no one else did it. He's the one that turned around and came back, even though it wasn't an easy thing to do. And really what he's doing is like affirming this guy and his choice to come back. And when he comes back and he's thrilled. He's yelling. In a loud voice, he throws himself at the feet of Jesus. It's this extravagant expression of joy. If we're talking about steps in the direction of gratitude, the last one we're talking about is expression. If last week we talked about intentionally seeing the good in our situations and in the people around us, expression is intentionally saying the good, getting it out, sharing it with other people, and not keeping it to yourself. There's a guy, his name is C.S. Lewis. We've talked about him before. He's a theologian. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. He's a philosopher. He's a thinker, and he's from England. He's British. So he's super smart for a number of different reasons. And he actually writes about experiences like this and emotions and how we process them as humans. And one thing that he says that's helpful, especially when it comes to this idea of gratitude, is that an emotion is not fully experienced until it's expressed. And you know this, right? If you've ever been overcome with emotion, you need to get it out. It naturally wants to come out. That's how the experience is completed. I remember in 2008, the Giants were in the Super Bowl. You remember this? Playing the Patriots? It was amazing. One of the best days of my whole life. And it was not looking good for the Giants. It was pretty tough, and it was getting down to the time was running out. It was the end of the game, and then there was the play. Eli Manning's got the ball. He drops back to pass. The Patriots defensive line gets around the Giants offensive line. There's all this pressure. He's grabbed. It looks like he's going down, and then there was this uncharacteristic display of athleticism from Eli Manning, and he spins around, gets away, chucks the ball downfield, and he throws it to a wide receiver that nobody had heard of up until that moment, a guy named David Tyree, who catches the ball on top of his head. It's called the catch. And all of a sudden, there was hope for the Giants to win the Super Bowl. When he caught that ball, I screamed at the top of my lungs. And it was like I couldn't help it because there was all this emotion, and it had to come out. And this is not just unique to me. My dad does the same thing. And my mom and my sister, my mom and my wife and my sister too, none of them like it. And they'll watch us, watching a game, and they'll come into the room and they'll be like, do you have to yell? They can't hear you. You don't need to tell them you don't like that play, right? But there's this part of us that's we gotta get this out. And you know what? They do the same thing. And it's not with the Giants, unfortunately, but they'll watch movies. My wife, she'll watch some Hallmark movie and it'll be sad. And I'll walk into the room and she's crying. And I'll just be like, why? These people, they don't even exist. That story didn't happen. Somebody wrote this in their basement and you're crying. But when we feel, we need to express it. It completes the emotion. It's why when you love someone, you want to tell them that. And gratitude is part of that. It's a way of getting that out. It completes the experience. And try it. Next time, if you have kids and your kids are in school and they come home and they talk about something their teacher did and they had a meaningful experience, write them an email. And let them know, and watch what it does to your feelings of gratitude. It's it takes it to the next level simply because you've chosen to get it out. Now, up to this point in the series, really, we've been talking about gratitude and the way it benefits us, right? The one expressing the gratitude. But if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, or even if you just have relationships in your life that you care about, I would argue that really the most important aspect of gratitude is expressing it not just for your own good, but for the good of the people around you. There are people in your life that need to hear you point out the good in them. Not simply to feel grateful, but to express it. The role of gratitude, or the place of gratitude or the significance of gratitude, the presence of gratitude in a relationship, the role of gratitude will either amplify or undermine the health of your relationships. And maybe the word will isn't even necessary. I would argue that it is either helping or hurting your relationships. If you're someone who's extremely grateful and intentional about expressing that gratitude, it is feeding the health of your relationship. And if you're not, it is undermining the health of the relationship. It's one of those things that has a world of benefits that we do not see, right? Like picture it like this. Imagine you have, in your relationship, you cook. And you plan the cooking, you shop for the cooking, you do the cooking, and then you put out a meal for your significant other, and whoever it is, they're thrilled. And they are so good at expressing how much they appreciate that. They point out how much time it must have taken you and what you've sacrificed and what you could be doing instead. And you get this sense like you feel like they really do appreciate that I do this every single night or however often you do it. Like, picture you're in that situation. And then something happens, like one night you cook and they don't come home, or you don't hear from them, and the food's cold. How do you respond? Like if you know, and they have made it so clear how deeply they appreciate the work you put in on a regular basis, how much more likely are you to be like, you know what, something must be going on. I want to make sure they're okay. This must be legitimate, because there's been a foundation of gratitude that has been laid. Right? But if you're not, well, that's where, or if they're not and you're cooking for them, that's where all of a sudden, like the lack of gratitude opens the door for suspicion. You know, like, well, she just doesn't care about how much time I put into this. I'm taken for granted. I'm totally overlooked. She doesn't value me. He doesn't value me. Gratitude has this ability to like put a protective layer over relationships. It's not enough to just build a relationship on gratitude, but it enhances the good. And if it's not there, it can eat away at what is good. Gratitude can either help or hurt your relationships. And when we choose to express gratitude to the people in our lives, it brings us closer together. I had a coach when I was in 9th grade. He's one of my favorite coaches. He knew very little about basketball, though. His basketball coach didn't understand the game. But he was this loud Italian car salesman. And he got us pumped up. We had a blast on his team. And it was because he understood people. So he would get us excited. But I remember specifically there was one practice where we're scrimmaging, we're playing against each other, and I'm coming down the court with the ball, and I've got the opportunity to shoot. But I see someone on my team who's a little more open, and so I gave up the ball. He took the shot and went in, we scored. And we run back on defense and get ready for the ball to come our way. And he stops practice. And with his big, loud presence, he goes over to the kid who just scored, and he goes, "What just happened?" He's like, "We scored?" He's like, "Yeah, you made the shot?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "How'd you get the ball?" And then the kid starts to catch on. He looks around. He's like, "Well, Lou passed it to me." He's like, "Was it a nice pass?" "Yeah." He's like, "Did you tell him?" And from that point on, we were after every single play, we were forced to turn around and express appreciation to whoever made the play happen. And you know what it did? It took instead of people scoring and pounding their chest and celebrating themselves, they turned around and shared the joy of the experience with someone who got them the ball. And it brought us together as a team. The chemistry on that team was unbelievable. Life is a team sport. You don't win alone. If you're winning, someone in some way got you the ball. Have you turned around to recognize it? Or are we experiencing the good alone? Or maybe even feeling it, but not saying it, not expressing it. The flip side of this, the reality of unexpressed gratitude, I heard someone say this years ago and it stuck with me. When we don't share the good that we see, when someone gives to us, when someone sets us up and gives us the ball, and we don't say anything, and you know this if you've been on the receiving end, unexpressed gratitude is received as ingratitude. You ever had someone come up to you and accuse you of being ungrateful? And you're like, are you kidding me? I think you're the greatest thing in the world. It's not because you didn't feel it, it's because you didn't say it. And maybe you've approached other people because you felt like they were ungrateful, right? And maybe they're like, are you nuts? Of course I appreciate you. It's not because they didn't feel it, it's because they didn't say it. There are people in your life that need to hear you say it. But it's not easy. In fact, in this story, Jesus points, there are three things that Jesus sets up very intentionally to make a point about expressing gratitude. If you look in this story, you have people who were lepers, meaning they could do nothing. Their lives were, their future was looking bleak. And in an instant, they were given everything back. If there's ever a time when expressing gratitude should have come easily, it's when a leper is no longer a leper. And yet, 90% of them didn't go back. When it comes to expression, for us, it's often unnatural, which is why we have to teach kids to express gratitude, because we don't do it naturally. We may sometimes naturally feel it, but we don't naturally express it. Every gift has a giver, but we don't always connect the gift with the giver. The person who got us the ball. It's not natural. If there's ever a time someone should have naturally expressed it, should have been when this leper all of a sudden was given everything back. There's another aspect to this though, another obstacle when it comes to expressing gratitude is not just that it's unnatural, but it's inconvenient. You know, if I'm there with Jesus, I won't want to come off like ungrateful, right? But if Jesus were looking at me and he's like, go show yourself to the priest with the assumption like I'm going to be healed on the way, I wouldn't want to be ungrateful, but there'd be part of me that's like, well, can we just now, you know? Like, what if it doesn't go through the first time? But he intentionally sends them away. Why? Because it required him to turn around and come back. There will be times when you feel the need or the urge to express gratitude, and it will be tremendously inconvenient. It will take effort. It might not naturally pop up, the opportunity. It may take some planning because it's often inconvenient, and that's the point of the story. He could have healed all 10 of them right there and had all of them just naturally have good manners and be like, well, gee, thanks. But he sends them away to show us that often it's inconvenient. And not only that, but it's because it's unnatural and inconvenient, it's also abnormal. One of them out of 10 come back. It's not the norm. And there will be times when you're thinking, because my wife and I have been there, oh, should we say thanks to the teacher or to the coach or to the, what? And often, no one else is doing it, and that makes it uncomfortable, you know? Are we gonna go alone? Or if there's a boss that you're working for, and there's a whole group of people that are on the receiving end. It's like, am I gonna be the one that expresses gratitude? Or a parent in a family, or a grandparent? No one else is doing it, I'm the only. The question is, will you be the only one who goes back? Will you go back even if you're the only one? Or we could say, unnatural. It's unnatural to connect the gift with the giver. So the question is, when you look at the good in your life, even just one example of it, who got you that ball? Have you told them? Have you recognized them? The second question is, what does it take to recognize them? What do you have to do? Do you have to set up a conversation? You have to make a phone call? You have to go out to eat? Do you have to turn around and go back? Might be inconvenient. And will you do it even if you're the one? Will you be the one that goes back and invite the giver into the joy of receiving the gift? Share the experience of joy. Last week, if you were here, gave you some homework. We talked about intentionally seeing the good. What I challenged you to do, if you're a homework person, was to think about the people that were going to be at your Thanksgiving table. And to come up with a list, maybe in your notes app, maybe on a piece of paper, but a list of all the people that are going to be there, and just write down one good thing about them. To intentionally think, all right, maybe this person is my favorite person, maybe we don't gel on every area of life, but what's the good that I see in them? This week, if you want to take that to the next level, tell them. Share it with them when you see them. And here's what I can almost promise you. It will be inconvenient. It will probably feel a little unnatural, maybe a little awkward. And I don't think most people at your dinner are going to show up with their list of good qualities. You might be the only one. But there are people in your life that need to hear you point out the good in them. I'm going to ask the band to come back up here. We're out of time, but here's the picture I want to leave you with. My grandfather, his name was Jim. We called him Pop-Up. He passed away a few years ago. In my family, he's like a legend. He did the craziest things. He had a gazillion jobs. We've got Pop-Up stories for hours. And so he's got 7 kids, which means he has 1 million grandkids. I don't even know how many cousins I have, but we'd get together for holidays, and we'd all like sit around, and we would just tell stories. My wife, Allie, married into the family, and she's like, you guys tell the same stories every single year, but everyone pretends not to know them. But we do. And we just like, all the cousins would just celebrate our experiences, but also him, like what he's done. We joke about the funny things he says, his little quirks and sayings. And I remember, like, when he was alive, I remember thinking, as I'm like looking at all my cousins, like, man, I hope if one day I'm a grandfather, I hope my grandkids talk about me this way. Like, he must love that we talk about him like this. And then I had an unsettling thought. What if he doesn't know? What if no one has expressed it to him? What if together we talk about all our feelings of gratitude, all the good we see in him, but no one's saying it to him? What a tragedy that would be. And so who are the people in your life that need to know that you see good in them? And who do you need to share it with? Maybe this week, this Thanksgiving. Take a step in the direction of gratitude.